now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Naomi Coles. Wisconsin is staying near the top of nationwide rankings for COVID-19 vaccine administration. That's when measured by the number of available doses given out. I'm breaking all of this down with UW-Madison professor A.J. Sethi, and a bit later with Ann Lewandowski from the Rural Wisconsin Health Cooperative.
All right, good morning, and thanks so much for joining me today. I think the first question I have is, how do we go from 6th from the bottom nationwide, according to CDC rankings a couple months ago, to by at least one metric now we are 3rd from the top?
I think things have become much more efficient. So when supply comes in, shots and arms are happening rather quickly, and vaccines sort of aren't, stuck in freezers around the state waiting to be used. Initially, we ranked a little lower because of some issues through the federal partnership program with the local pharmacies and rolling it out with the nursing homes. That caused a little bit of a slowdown, but we clearly have recovered from that.
There's obviously different metrics we're talking about here, whether we're talking about percentage of doses by population or how many doses that we've actually used. What's the best way to compare rollouts from state to state, and how meaningful is that to our understanding of rollout overall and in the state?
Yeah, so now that we're sort of several months into the rollout, the comparisons can be a little tricky because different states have different criteria right now that they're following. So some states are vaccinating teachers and others are not quite yet. And so the pool of people, available to be vaccinated starts to look very different from state to state. And that can make it hard to make those comparisons. But so I think the timing of when people become eligible and when supply comes in and aligning that perfectly has been going well with Wisconsin. And as you know, new sort of groups become eligible when the previous group has sort of reached their 50% vaccinated sort of milestone. And so I think things have been going, sort of according to clockwork here in Wisconsin. That's helped. The other thing I say is that it's important to make comparisons with states of similar size because the vaccines allocated to the state are proportional to the population. So for us, our sort of the states within the 5 to 6 million population is Minnesota, Missouri, Colorado, Maryland. And when you look there for those comparisons, we do the best among those states. Maryland, and I can speak a little bit for Maryland because my parents live there. They, from the beginning, have had a hard time and they're just not recovering from that initial slowdown. They have made progress recently, but they sort of rank, towards the bottom of the 50 states.
Now, is it fair to say that, some of those that pulled ahead early, they kind of still maintained their lead, but then now we're kind of seeing, even with states of similar size as other states, kind of that shifting back and forth. Some are just not able to catch up. But is it also fair to say some are just going to stay near the bottom because that's how rankings work?
Yeah, rankings do sort of work that way. It's hard to sort of overcome a low ranking because you have to accelerate past the other states. If everybody moves along, at an appropriate pace, you won't, change your ranking. So you actually have to have, a good several weeks and months of being very efficient at getting the supplies into arms. The supplies are the main thing because everybody's getting a supply that's proportioned to the population. The question is, what are you going to do with those supplies? And that's where, Wisconsin's doing very well. We have among the highest proportion of doses actually used. And that kind of shows that the management is probably going very well. And that, again, people who are eligible to be vaccinated are also accepting vaccination. I imagine there are very few appointments that aren't filled right now because the demand is exceeding the supply. At some point, we're going to get, where 50% of the population is vaccinated, maybe 60%, where we're going to start to hit maybe a little bit of a wall, where fewer people who are eligible to be vaccinated, relatively fewer, may not be accepting the vaccine immediately. And that's where I think we'll see how Wisconsin compares with other states.
How concerned should we be about, like, for example, the variants in Wisconsin? We have 19 cases now, or people just potentially getting too comfortable too quickly?
Yeah, it is an issue. We're lucky that the vaccines that we have available all work against the variants, that they all will prevent serious illness that's caused by these variants of the coronavirus. The cliche of it being a race against the variants is very true. We want to vaccinate as quickly as possible. The loosening of restrictions, is also can be a concern because if people perceive that as a green light, that we're going back to business as usual, we can undo the progress that we made. So if you hear that we can now have larger gatherings and 50% capacity in different businesses, that's great because we want to reopen society. But you have to read the fine print. You still have to wear a mask indoors. You still have to keep your distance, and you have to take all the precautions that you've been doing before. So it's a dialing back of restrictions and not a complete lifting of all restrictions. And so if we do it carefully, it can work. And so it really comes down to people sort of being, being okay with and being ready to continue those precautions, even though we're loosening some of the restrictions.
When we come back, what this rollout means for the state's rural areas.